Hey guys, Kate Perez here. I just wanted to share with you what went on at the City Council meeting last night on the 10th of August when we discussed the tree ordinance. And the tree ordinance is basically a lot of citizens of Titusville trying to get the city to agree to preserve a certain percentage of our tree canopy so that we don't all just burn up and flood out all the time. If you're wondering what you've been looking at pictures of, that's Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has a target of 60% tree canopy preservation for their city, and it's no wonder that they're one of the top 5 cities in the U.S. for quality of life.
We currently have an approach in our landscape code that talks about preservation of 10% in residential.
Okay, when she talks about 10% in residential, she means currently the developers are allowed to completely clear cut, scrape every living thing off of a site if they're going to put commercial or industrial. But the 10% about residential is vegetation, not trees, just any living thing. 10%.
Member Jordan.
Thank you. First of all, I'm going to apologize because it's after 8 o'clock. My bedtime is 8 o'clock. Okay, so just want you to know
You
that.
told me 8:30.
I told you 8:30?
You got 15 more
I'm
minutes.
I'm getting older, so. Just want to remind again, when we first started this, we asked for low-hanging fruit. We've gone beyond that. I remember we started with trees, preserving the trees. We all say we want to preserve trees as much as possible. And then someone came up with canopy, which I knew nothing about. I understand it now, but I knew nothing about it. Now look like we're expanding based on the red lines I see. We're talking about industrial and commercial areas when we were only talking about, what do you call it, the residential. First, so I'm not interested in commercial and industrial. I will tell you that now. That doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm just looking at what's happening around me in the industrial area now. Even though there's some trees and everything, I looked at it and I thought to myself, man, we're going to put a big building here, and right in the middle of it may be something mandatory that we, in my mind, foolishly said we needed to do, and it's preventing the developer, the business, from getting a return on their investment. So I am really not interested in industrial and commercial, and I think we should just strike that and do exactly what we said in the beginning, which we all agreed to, and that really was what was it again?
Heritage trees?
Heritage trees.
No, the development.
Oh,
Also,
residential.
residential, thank you. I told you I'm getting sleepy, so I don't remember. But I think we all want to do the right thing, but I also do have this map that you all gave us, and we've got over 3,200, actually 3,600 acres of preserved land that has a lot of trees on it, for sure. So we got to understand what our vision is for the future. We got to understand where we're trying to go, and we also have to understand that we got to live. And for us to say we're going to save a tree despite what we need in the city, it makes no sense to me at all. But it does make sense that we have trees, and I think we got a lot of them for sure. The question is, what is reasonable? What can we live with as far as a council to make sure that we're promoting a great environment, because we are a tree city, but also making sure that we don't push developers out and say, we just not going to have you because, and we can't even do that because they actually own land. You know, all these developers own land, and they should have a right to do what they want reasonably within the guidelines that we have. So when I look at the red lines that we have so far, and I'm in agreement, we can't go way over with what I see TEC says. I'm not even sure I like a lot of stuff that planning and zoning said, but I think they're trying to be more reasonable with it. I like what the staff has done, but you still kept the commercial and industrial in, and I'm just not going to support if it's commercial and industrial. It just, in my mind, it just makes no sense. But when we start talking about what's going to happen. Everybody wants a beautiful community to live in, nice houses, nice trees, shaded trees and everything. So I'm going to be supportive of that, but we just need to make sure. And I really like the idea that you showed what happens to a 50-year-old tree versus the size, the deviation, all that good stuff. It makes sense. So I think we as a council just need to try to make sure we're as reasonable as possible when it comes down to what we can live with that is reasonable for all concerned. Because I think everybody here loves trees. No one wants to do the wrong thing. But as the mayor said at the last meeting, somebody's going to leave here upset. But I think because we are all elected to do the right thing, we're going to try our best to do the right thing. But it definitely needs to be reasonable in what we decide, for sure. So,
And it seems like a long time ago now, we had more finite vision, and then clearly we have a care, a concern for trees, or we wouldn't have had so much input from so many committees. And it seems like a long time ago now, we had more finite vision, and then clearly we have a care, a concern for trees, or we wouldn't have had so much input from so many committees and so many people. And we wouldn't still be doing this now if we didn't care about and love trees. I said it last time, I'll say it again. It just sometimes seems if you're willing to look at compromise, I mean, up here we have to, because we don't just represent the tree people. We don't just represent the developers. We represent 47,000 people. Because we don't just represent the tree people. We don't just represent the developers. We represent 47,000 people.
All right. Member Jordan stole my thunder this time.
Good.
Appreciate
Even.
that. No, it kind of goes back to what our vision for the city is, and the maps that start on 228 are very helpful. When looking through them, seeing all the conservation, the residential, commercial, and industrial. To me, if we're planning and looking at the future of the city of Titusville, just seeing the amount of commercial and industrial, which in my opinion is not that much, it doesn't make any sense for me, from my perspective, to put a requirement on that. Obviously, we have more residential, and when we're talking about quality of life and what we want our community to look like, I do think that we need to have standards in place. Peggy, I was going to see if you could help me out here. To Member Jordan's point, trying to get that low-hanging fruit and moving forward on some wins that we can do right now, I'm looking at this from 5 different things. Canopy, the heritage trees, waivers and appeals, incentives, and mitigation requirements. That's from my perspective of what I feel like we can potentially adjust, amend, or residential only. Do you think that I'm missing any area of concern?
I think you've hit the big 5.
Vice Mayor.
I'm going to disagree with Member Jordan, Member Stokel. I don't have a problem with requiring trees on commercial and industrial. And I had up Brevard County. I think Brevard County requires 35%. It was something.
No, ma'am, not
Well,
according
it
to,
wasn't Brevard County. It was
Oh.
Port Richey.
could be. There are places that do require that. Brevard County actually allows less in industrial than they do commercial and residential.
And I can understand that, but on the other hand, I don't think we should turn around and say, well, it's industrial property. Let's just clear cut the whole thing. And especially because we are allowing developers, owners to come in and say, hey, there's this huge tree in the middle, we need to get rid of it. And we can get rid of it if there's no other way around it. But I don't, to come in and just clean everything out and say, I don't need to put anything on this property, I think that's just crazy. I mean, we're looking for a town that has appeal. To me, my vision was always Winter Park. I want to live in Winter Park, and I don't want to live in Miami. So to say that these pieces of property, we're just going to clear cut them, we don't care. I don't think we should do that. So,
You good?
you guys.
No, Member Jordan?
Yeah, of course I'm going to respond to that because that's not what I said. I mean, no developer is going to come in and clear cut the property. You added those word clear cut, and I don't think Member Stoker and I were saying clear cut. We're just saying that you don't need to have this requirement in the industrial and commercial area. The developer is going to try to make his development as beautiful as possible, and if he's got a tree that he doesn't have to remove, he's not going to remove the tree. It costs money to remove something that you don't need to remove. You know, it just makes no sense. So clear cutting is not even in the equation. This is not about being Miami versus someplace else. This is just being reasonable with what is we're trying to do. Low hanging fruits is what we're looking for. We don't need to be we have not had any requirement for industrial commercial to this point, and now we have it in this red line version, which I don't agree with. So I'm still saying, and you haven't convinced me otherwise, that we need to have it in there, especially when you use clear cutting for sure. I do. Go ahead.
I'm sorry if I could. I'd just like to
Yeah.
comment that there are landscaping requirements for industrial and commercial.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there's still the mitigation requirement if trees are removed.
All right.
So it's just not that mandatory 10% preservation.
Right.
And not the mandatory save the large tree. Is
Well,
that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is the tree's in the middle of what I'm trying to build. That tree's gone. You know, I have a right to build what I want. What I'm saying is we need to be reasonable. If there are other trees around, yeah, we're going to preserve those trees because we're not going to knock them down just to be knocking them down. It's not going to be clear cutting. The industrial, the development, and I think what Peggy is explaining to us, I mean, there are things in place already to make sure that they don't just clear cut it as what you're saying. We don't need requirements because no person who is trying to save money when they develop is just going to knock trees down just to be knocked down because there is no requirement per what you're saying. There are requirements.
That's why I'm trying to make sure
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
They are required. They are definitely required. But I do have a question about forested, what do you call it? Forested?
Forested wetlands.
Yeah. I really want to be clear with that. I just don't think that you should try to penalize a landowner because he actually has some trees in a forested area that could be used as mitigation, if you will. To say, no, that is exempt, and you've got, say, an acre of trees that just happen to be in a forested area, and you can't use that to mitigate what you are doing around it. To me, it just doesn't make any sense at all.
And that is the current requirement. The code says that if it's required to be preserved from some other reason,
Right.
you can't include it in your requirement for landscaping. So
Okay.
if we've had cases where a developer will come in and say, I'm going to save all the wetlands, and then they don't get to take any of those wetlands and count them toward their landscaping.
Yeah.
And that's the current code. And so what happens is you see people, it's kind of a game that, there's a little dance that we play over there in community development. Someone will come in and they have a couple of sacrificial lots that they know they're not going to get anyway, but they go ahead and show us the 120, knowing that they're only going to get 117, so they can give up 3. So, and then we have the little dance that we do, requiring things, knowing that we can back off. So there's a little bit of give and take on both sides. But right now, it is difficult, especially when they come through the public hearing process and they're doing the best they can to make the community happy by saying, we'll give you this, we'll give you this. Then that's the next step in the process. They feel like they've been penalized because they've given it all up front and now they can't utilize it in the landscaping.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
we're getting
sorry.
ready to move to cards, but I'm going to conclude by saying that I agree with Member Jordan and Member Stokel too. I do believe when we started this, we were talking about let's get some low-hanging fruit so we can get some tree ordinance rolling here because we care about trees. And now if we get caught up in how we do the incorporated areas, et cetera, it gets a little bit tricky. So, you know, I say we're not going to make everybody happy, and we're not going to even be able to, up here on the council, be able to come together for poor Miss Busaka down there and come up with something. But we sure are trying. Okay, we are going to move to cards. So I don't even know how many yet. So just call.
Kay St. Ong.
Yes, I'm Kay St. Ange, Titusville Tree Team, Maryland Avenue. I really did want to communicate with Mr. Jordan, so I'm terribly disappointed that he walked away.
Would you like to, you want to go to the next one?
Yes.
Sit down just for a
I would
second.
like to
Let's call the
communicate
second
with
one up.
Mr. Jordan.
Joe Hill.
Howdy, guys, again. I'd like to applaud.
Name, don't forget.
Oh, Joe Hill,
Thank you.
Brownie Avenue.
Thank
here
you.
in Titusville. I'd like to applaud the staff for getting, and you guys for initiating this, because I have been heartbroken by seeing some of the clear cutting I've seen in some of these developments. An example is Publix, when they put in Publix. We had a council member here, none of you were on council then, but she was wanting to protect a big old oak tree over there. And they changed their whole design to make sure they saved that oak tree. But when they brought the road in there, they dug up all the roots. So when that big hurricane came through, guess what? The oak tree. It's gone now. So that needs to be something that needs to be, if you're going to try to preserve a tree, but the corner of Barna and Park, they put a development in there. They kept their percentage of how many native trees, but all around the edges. They took everything out in the middle. So I just think we could do a better job in trying to preserve some of them.
Thank you so much, Ms. St. Ange.
Yes, my name is Kay St. Ange, Titusville Tree Team, and I live on Maryland Avenue. The current code allows removal of all but 10% of vegetation, an area of 10% of vegetation. It does not require that any trees be saved. Only 10% area vegetation. So that's why over 2 years ago, April 2019, the tree team came together and petitioned council for an ordinance to prevent removal of all but 10% of vegetation. The latest two staff's versions have included a requirement of an area of tree canopy, a percentage. And so it's surprising to me that now council is considering backing off on that when both advisory boards have worked diligently on working off of those requirements posed. The latest staff version, July 2021, has several whereas clauses that provide persuasive statements for the passage of this latest proposed ordinance, including compliance with the comprehensive plan that says no clear cutting and the standards of the Tree City USA. One clause says trees retain and filter water. Indeed, a mature oak tree can consume 40,000 gallons of polluted stormwater in a year. It can consume 40,000 gallons of polluted stormwater in a year. Without an effective tree protection ordinance, most trees in the 4,800 acres available for development will likely be removed, greatly increasing polluted stormwater discharge into the lagoon. This further degradation of the lagoon will be disastrous environmentally and economically, Mr. Jordan. It would be environmentally and economically disastrous, reducing property values and dissuading prospective residents and businesses from locating in Titusville if the lagoon was degraded to the extent that this clear cutting would allow. One whereas clause indicates trees provide shade and reduce temperatures, but staff's required preserved canopy of 15% of a residential development area is inadequate to provide sufficient shade to reduce temperatures in neighborhoods. We need to require at least 25% preserved canopy to reduce temperatures for residents. Add a provision that the required preserved canopy be located near the houses, as Sarah Stokel has recommended, in protected areas noted on the site plan and not just around the periphery of developments. We need those trees to provide temperature reduction and livability in our new residential developments. E at the top of page 5.
How much more do you have?
I got a little bit more. I would ask that all the ordinance in front of you requires all required tree canopies shall be permanently protected in a recorded plat or declaration of covenants. This should be HOA covenants. These trees should be protected in common lands owned by the HOA, so that because we know that the state regulations do not allow for permanent protection of trees on homeowners' lots. Therefore, they should be on homeowners in the homeowner's common land. We need to provide permanent protection for heritage trees 36 inches DBH or larger rather than 46. If you will make these additional changes to the staff's recent ordinance, I think we will have a significant ordinance that will make Titusville truly a gateway to nature and the space industry. Thank you.
Thank you. That was close to 3 minutes, closer to 3.5. So let's work hard on that. Ms. Kate does a great job of trying to stay within that, and I took that in consideration. But how many cards do we have?
Well, we have about 11 or 12.
Let's work hard on staying on 3 minutes. I really don't want to cut somebody off. I don't want to be that rude person. You're at 3 minutes, you're done. But if you're within 15 seconds or so, we'll go. But if you've got a minute and a half or so, we're going to stop and say thank you very much. So we're 3 minutes. Next card.
Kim Rezanka.
It wasn't Miss Wells, though.
Glad I'm not calling the names. Thank you. She's got her attorney face on.
I'll let her give them out.
And I'm going to get in trouble.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Diesel, members of the City Council. My name is Kim Rezanka. I'm with the law firm of Lacey Lyons Rezanka out of the Rockledge office. I prepared for you a package. This is somewhat unusual. I know there's no votes today, but there's a lot of information in this ordinance. There's a lot of information before you. I didn't see the 4,000 pages, but it's kind of ironic when you're talking about tree preservation. My son came with me last time. He's in college studying urban planning, and he said, no one was against the ordinance. I said, did you not hear what I said? So I wanted everyone to know that I am against this new ordinance, hence opposition to tree preservation ordinance on this title page. And I'm on behalf of several clients, 2 that own property, 2 are looking at property to develop here, and this will substantially impact their ability to develop. The actual ordinance says tree protection, not tree preservation. I'm not sure if you noticed that. And I'd ask that, you think about the intent has been stated by Councilmember Jordan was preservation, not protection. My first concern is excessive regulation. As I said last time, you went from 4 pages to 14. It's actually 3.5 to 14.5 pages with this ordinance. There's a lot of information in here, and I don't think it was with the intent of what I understood Councilmember Jordan to state. I've actually stated the specific concerns with my excessive regulation. I don't know of the evidence to support these changes. Just because the county does it or Naples does it doesn't make it right for the city. So you have to have some evidence, and you have to figure out what that evidence is and why it is and how this is going to impact anyone who wants to develop and what's left of land to develop, which is difficult to develop, as Ms. Pisaka stated. Not all trees should be created equally. That was discussed last time. Some trees are more valuable than others. There's many definitions for heritage trees. I cited things in here that I found just by Googling. Some heritage trees are 72 inches, but sometimes they do go out in the community and identify certain trees that they want to protect. Outstanding specimen by virtue of its location, health, age, size, or rarity. And so there are many different ways to define heritage trees. A heritage oak, excuse me. And then there's also just on page 4, 5, and 6, things to consider as well. Age, species, historical significance, things like that. So it doesn't have to be a straight 48 inches or 46 inches, 36 inches. So also, too, the replacement of 1-inch caliper to 2.5-inch caliber, how is that decided upon? Some of these criteria for removal are vague and ambiguous. There's a lack of objective guidance. I don't know what they mean. And these are new. Unintended consequences. Are there going to be double penalties? The costs are going to be greatly increased, I'm sure, but do we know how much? I will sum. I'd ask that you keep to the intent that you demand evidence to support, that you grandfather the sketch plat. It's still not grandfathered sufficiently. You need to add a sketch plat to A and B of Section 13 and delete D in its entirety. And I'd ask you also consider Florida Statute 70.002, which is the property owner's Bill of Rights. And that number 7 says the right to relief or payment of compensation when a new law, rule, regulation, or ordinance of the state or political entity unfairly affects your property. And I submit that this will unfairly affect property, and you don't even know what it's going to do because it hasn't been taken to that nth degree.
Thank you.
I'd ask that you consider not adopting all of this ordinance. Thank you.
Next card.
Thomas Perez.
Oh, hold on 1 second.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, member Jordan, I see it now. Member Jordan,
miss me, man.
relax.
Please.
Keep talking my football analogy. I'll never forget it.
Ms. Rezanka actually brought up a good point. She has reminded us that she is an attorney, and we have this new requirement as far as what landowners' rights are. And I think she may be shooting across the bow to say if this thing is not right, you could find yourself in litigation. And I know our attorney don't like litigation for sure. And I just want us to not just arbitrarily put something down on paper as far as what we think heritage trees are or other types of trees are. And then we find ourselves in litigation because that's not really what it should be, or it's not concise enough. You may not be
After much review, I believe that these are all standards that are determined by community. And as much as attorneys like to see a specific number tied to a specific requirement, I don't believe that that is possible in a tree ordinance.
We need to go on, but I want to tell Ms. Rezanka, I saw you in the paper, and congratulations on your award for sure. So, all right. Okay, thank you.
Next card, please.
Thomas Perez.
Good evening. I'm Tom Perez, 3025 South Washington Avenue, and I'm also a member of the Environmental Commission. We are discussing the tree ordinance at this meeting. However, my comments are just as relevant to the issue of low-impact development. They concern the effects of development, which by and large has the greatest negative impact on the overall environment, and in particular the Indian River Lagoon. Before I start, I want to make it clear that development is a part of the normal evolution of our communities. It is necessary. The question is how to bring balance into the equation so that development does not occur at the expense of our environment. Development needs to take the advantage of new technologies, which are coming all the time, based on data that guides how we need to proceed and address the continued deterioration of our environment. Our environment is inextricably tied to to the health and well-being of all the ecosystems that support every living thing. For example, we now know from data collected on the flow of water in the Indian River Lagoon during a one-year study that there is no apparent flow occurring in either direction between the causeways around Titusville. What this means is that whatever gets flushed into the lagoon here in Titusville stays in the lagoon here in Titusville. And it is apparent that this has been the case for a long time. So it's no surprise that the condition of the lagoon has been and will continue to deteriorate. We are at a point where response to public pressure has resulted in some action. The value citizens place on their environment resulted in their vote of approval of a half-cent tax. This helps to begin to pay for the cleanup of our past negligence, which resulted from needlessly destructive developmental practices. We need to change the practices that have brought us to this juncture, or we can only expect more of the same. The decisions facing council demand in-depth knowledge of the issues at hand. Council have selected the individual commissioners for their backgrounds and expertise. These commissioners have done the research and consulted with other resources as needed to give council recommendations that are based on science and what they judge to be best for this community. Council also must read and dig into the issues to appreciate and understand the recommendations made by these commissioners. Briefings are not a substitute, cannot take the place of, and do not do justice to the work that has been performed by the environmental and the P&C commissions to bring their recommendations to you.
15 seconds if you're going to finish.
You have the vested power and responsibility to make these decisions that are in the best interest of your community, that these recommendations ensure. The Indian River Lagoon will not be getting better on its own, and in the best circumstances, based on models from other areas undertaking this work, it will take decades of continued improvements to make it healthy again. Titusville has used up its ecological budget. The consistent downward trend illustrated by the latest Marine Resources Council report verifies what many have been saying. The Indian River Lagoon is in a state of collapse.
We need to
Manatees
stop.
are dying in record numbers
Yep.
from starvation.
We're good. I appreciate your time. Your 3 minutes is up, and 3 minutes, 30 seconds is up. So thank you very much. All right, we're going to do a tutoring in my educational class. We need to practice our speeches on 3 minutes. All right, because we're going to start stopping at 3 minutes because my extra 15 seconds is getting really long. So with that, let's go to the next card.
Tony
Practice,
Cipollo.
people.
Tony Cipollo, 715 Tropic Street. I had a little 3-minute speech prepared, and I do practice my words.
I know you do. She does.
But I think what I'd rather do is just kind of speak and answer a few things that have been said in the room tonight. I was going to talk about things that happened at the special session Tuesday, July 20th, when Patricia Weeks of the Space Coast Association of Realtors president expressed that oak tree roots can be very bad for foundations, roads, and sewer systems. And I was going to tell her that, well, foundations, roads, and sewer systems can be very bad for tree roots, and which should be protected from desecration by development. And I wanted to speak to Kim Rezanka, who happens to be here tonight, who stated that a vocal minority asked for these changes and it's unfair to many property owners. We are.
Here, turn around.
We are not a vocal minority. We are representing a lot of Titusville citizens. I represent my immediate neighbors on a 2-block area. There are many members of the tree team that are members of other organizations that represent a lot of people, like the Sierra Club, the Titusville Garden Club, for example. And it may be unfair to development property owners, but to those of us who live in the city, it's a very fair thing to want to protect all the trees that we can, because they contribute so much to saving the environment. And as Tom was talking about the degradation of the Indian River Lagoon, we got to remember, lagoon, it's not a river. What goes into it stays, and the causeways trap it. And I'm so passionate about this, and I'm so sorry to take up your time. I should come and talk to you individually, because I have a lot to say to you, Mr. Jordan, with your opinions that the government should not be in the business to prevent smart development, but instead should work with developers to preserve as many trees as possible without making it mandatory. You know, if it's not mandatory, they're not going to do it. It's so easy to bring a bulldozer in and cut the trees down. It's not like they have to individually axe each one. And you also suggested, Mr. Jordan, that giving the administrators, and who are the administrators, giving them more leeway to make decisions instead of making the developer go through the Board of Adjustments and Appeals or the TEC, which is the city's tree board, to make appeals, because it would be cheaper and easier on the developer. Who cares about...
Thank you. Thank you. Next card, please.
Looks like Yvette, I think it's F-L-I-S or F-L-I-G.
Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Yvette Flis. I live at 4860 Santa Rosa Avenue in Titusville, and I have lived here for 30 years, give or take. And I live here. This is my home. And I have seen clear cutting, and I have seen, wetlands destroyed. And I understand that this is good for business, but this is not good for me or my neighbors, the people that I live with, my children, my grandchildren growing up, who would really like to have the opportunity to go into the river again one day, or not sweat like crazy in April because the trees are all gone, which, of course, as we all know, regulate temperature. I mean, if we've decided that 10% of new homes, the new building residences, whatever, home residential areas, should be preserved for trees, that still means that 90% of them that are there existing are gone, and that's a pretty big number. And if we decide that we don't, industry should be exempt from this, what is the industry? The people who have the businesses don't live where I live, and they don't apparently have the concern for their children or their grandchildren or the students that they see walking on the street to have a normal, healthy life. I mean, why are we not being considered? Why is it only the businesses that are considered? Why is it not your grandchildren or your children or your great-grandchildren or your ability to stick your feet in Sandpoint Park, in the water there, or see the manatees that we used to see just by looking into the water? Now you can't say anything because it's so dirty. Why does that not matter? Why are you guys not caring about the land that you live on, the world that you live in? And my home, Titusville, this is what we hired you for. And we hired you. We hired you to represent us. I am one of 47,000 people that live in the city that voted for you guys. The guys that have the businesses, they're not voting for you. Maybe they're supporting your political career, but they're not voting for you. You work for us. And I wish that you would remember that. And take care of your environment. You got it.
Thank you. I think I'll just move on to the next one. Next card,
Kate Perez.
please.
Kathleen Perez. I live at 3025 South Washington Avenue in Titusville. So I live in Titusville. I'm a landowner, but I also live here. In the last few meetings, when I've heard the tree ordinance discussed, I've been distressed to witness the developers, lawyers for developers, and members of the Florida Association of Realtors, none of whom live here in Titusville, attend these meetings and argue that they or their clients are being treated unfairly if they're made to follow our zoning rules, or, God forbid, if we add a rule that would preserve a small portion of our existing tree canopy. I've heard them say, well, I'm a property owner in Titusville, and I can't make money on the land I bought unless I get a variance to circumvent the rules. And they get one. If I buy something, let's say a car, intending to make money reselling it, and it turns out that I can't make money, isn't that my own miscalculation? Over and over, I've heard city council members saying, we used to have a reputation for being anti-development. We can't stop progress. I'd suggest that we now have a reputation for an anything goes type of development, and that's why these developers are here. Melbourne and Viera are already overbuilt, hot, crowded, have terrible traffic. So they come here, but I don't want to live in Melbourne or Viera. I used to teach in Viera. The trees are all evenly spaced palms, no canopy, no diversity. Almost every house there is in a gated neighborhood with lawns that are so fertilized that they're just basically polluted. I couldn't wait to get home and see my live oaks and my variety of wildflowers. I want shade in the city, and I've yet to hear a city council member say something like, well, we can't get a reputation for voting against the well-being of our citizens. We don't want our own citizens to live in hotter and hotter neighborhoods that increasingly flood due to clear cutting of trees. Developers didn't elect you. The Florida Association of Realtors didn't elect you. So I feel like you're honor bound to vote in our interest. We don't want the excess flooding. We don't want the hotter temperatures, and it's dangerous for everybody here. So I heard that the city is going to put in a water retention system in front of La Cita. I think I heard that correctly. But trees are a water retention system, okay? And they're free because they're already there. Thank you.
My name is Pam Dershka.
You're done.
Boy, that was quick.
You're done. All right, start the clock. There we go.
All right. And I live on Arbor Ridge Lane in Titusville. I live close by Forest Trace off Sisson Road. So I was able to watch the neighborhood that developed under the current guidelines. A neighbor did a drone update periodically for our neighborhood Facebook group. And so we got to see it really close up at a lot of stages. When we watched the bulldozers level the site, I couldn't imagine that they even left more than a few trees. Then I heard they maintained 10% of the trees. Well, there's a section at the front and a little section in the back. The bulk of the property was scraped to sand and dirt, and they did bring in a lot of fill, as was mentioned here at this meeting. During that time, we saw gopher tortoises passing through our neighborhood. There are now 35 gopher tortoises who have made their home in the swell between Arbor Woods and Arbor Ridge, as identified from the FWC in March of this year. I believe the timing would support the likelihood that they came from Forest Trace. I wonder how many did not survive. Forest Trace and other similar developments show that the current tree requirements are not strong enough. In fact, 15% of development area in preserved canopy is inadequate. Please require at least 25% of the preserved tree canopy. The Forest Trace example also shows that a significant portion of preserved tree canopy must be near the houses, not just along the periphery of the development. In addition, the designation of heritage trees should start at 36 diameter breast height, not at 46 like was mentioned, because 46-inch trees are rare indeed. A significant amount of tree canopy will provide shade to cool the neighborhoods, and we need that. They provide quality of life. Trees reduce polluted stormwater discharge into the lagoon. Trees provide connection to nature. Trees provide wildlife habitat. And an inadequate amount of tree canopy will not produce these benefits. I applaud the TEC and the Titusville Tree Team for all their work to bring the changes to the code. While they've been working with the city on this, it's become too late for projects already clearing their land. I understand 1,400 acres are currently being developed. We all drive by these projects. However, 4,800 additional acres are available for development, so it's critical that the code is updated. If continuing moving all the trees as currently allowed by code, the results will be devastating. Titusville's motto is gateway to nature and space. Let's not remove the nature from our motto. Thank you.
Thank you. And she practiced her 3 minutes.
I did.
I can tell. Next card, please.
William Klein.
Mr. Klein, did you practice your 3 minutes?
I hope to be less. I'm Bill Klein from 3 Indian River Avenue. Heat kills people. In the U.S., hundreds of people die from heat exhaustion each year. Tree canopy shading and transportation reduces air and surface temperatures below the tree canopy. Air temperatures in Florida rural areas can be 17 degrees cooler than nearby cities. Surface temperatures of walls and roofs can be reduced by 45 degrees. Parking under trees can reduce temperature inside the car by 45 degrees. The Japanese practice of forest bathing is the practice of immersing yourself in nature, using your senses to derive a whole range of benefits for your physical, mental, emotional, and social health. It can boost immunity and lead to fewer days of illness and faster recovery from injury or surgery. If improving the health and welfare of the residents and saving the lives is not enough incentive to provide tree canopy to shade yards, playgrounds, and walkways, then maybe preventing 2 billion gallons of polluted water per year from draining into the IRL will be incentive to provide tree canopy and require LID. It seems Titusville City Council spends more money designing gateway entrances that aren't used, publishing Titusville talking points, putting up signs advertising we are the gateway to nature and a tree city, than we do planting trees. Our tree canopies over walkways and over our parks to improve the health and welfare of the residents and to reduce the polluted stormwater from flowing into the storm ponds and the IRL. Advertising that we are the gateway to nature in a tree city does not make it so. Preserving and planting trees for their cooling shade, reducing stormwater pollution, and providing food and habitat for wildlife will make us the gateway to nature in a tree city. We need canopy. Atlanta has 50%. Pittsburgh has a goal of 60%. And Fort Bragg is going for 70%. And we're begging for 25. That's a disgrace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Good evening. I've become quite famous. Patricia Weeks, President of Space Coast Association of Realtors. Hello. I am here again speaking for the association, sort of. I'm going to step outside my role as president here in a second because I wanted to say a couple of things. As a realtor who shows property and sold many houses up here in Titusville, thank you very much for not wanting to do the commercial and industrial areas. I think that goes back to, again, your main point of what you all wanted to do. One thing that's not, brought up at all is the cost of this to the future homeowners, because it will not be the builders who pay this. It will be the future homeowners who will have to pay the additional cost. Everybody is screaming about affordable housing, and this will affect the cost of homes in Titusville. And so consequently, that has to be factored in. My buyers all want to live in nice looking neighborhoods. And if you go to any of these new subdivisions, yes, they may have to take down the trees to put in the infrastructure because everybody wants sewer, not septic. They want underground utilities. They want all those things. So they have to tear up the ground in order to do that, and would make it very hard. However, when you drive through, they all have preserve areas. My own neighborhood is a new neighborhood. I bought new 4 years ago, and you either live on a retention pond or you live up against a preserve area. And there are walking paths and everything, and that's what most people want. And so when they move here and these new subdivisions that are put in, yes, they do have to take down some of the trees, but they do try and save them, and they save them in beautiful ways. And as she was saying, all the neighborhoods that have been built actually saved more than what they were required to because they want them to look nice. They get more money for them if you're not backed up to another house. If you're backed up to a pond or to a preserve area, they're going to get more money for that home. The builder is. So that's why I would love to see it not get changed if possible. And I want to make sure I'm looking at my notes and not. And also, when it comes to all the tree canopy thing, insurance companies are not happy with trees overhanging homes because they can fall during storms, as we know. So we all love a nice big tree canopy, but that's something that also has to be taken into account as far as how big the trees are, that you can run into issues. I mean, the insurance companies are really dictating so many things now on even the age of your roof. If it's older than 10 years old, you can't get insurance. They want it replaced. So I am done, but thank you, and thank you all for mentioning me. I'm really a nice person. So.
Hi, I'm Laura Lee Thompson, 3550 Irwin Avenue in Mims. However, I do own a business here in Titusville.
Yes, you do.
And I grew up in Titusville, and I love Titusville. So I've spent the last couple of days last week over in Bonita Springs going to the FWC meetings, trying to find out about the status of manatees in the Indian River Lagoon. It's not pretty. And then I spent all day today at the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program Management Board and their STEM committee meetings. And again, there was a lot of reports on the status of manatees in the northern Indian River Lagoon. And what I found out today is it's even worse than what I thought, because our manatees in the Indian River Lagoon, they've actually been suffering from malnutrition for years. It didn't just happen this year. Our manatees have been undernourished and haven't had enough to eat for a long, long time, maybe as far back as 2013. So where you have manatees that are fat and happy at Crystal River, where they have plenty to eat because they've been successful with seagrass restoration, our manatees over here have been suffering for years. And this year, they finally got to where their bodies just couldn't take it anymore. And so, we saw all these pictures of these flat manatees, laying on boards with their ribs sticking out, with their little peanut heads. And the one thing that kept coming out was pollution in the northern Indian River Lagoon has killed the seagrass beds. Well, guys, we're it. There is no other community up here in the northern Indian River. And they've done, Gary Zarillo from FIT has done studies on the water movement in the Indian River Lagoon. The water in the Titusville area, it takes a year for that water to have any kind of movement. Same thing with the southern Mosquito Lagoon and the northern Banana River. So these three major estuaries that are right here, that are ground zero for the whole eastern Florida manatee population in the wintertime, we have no water movement here. So we have to look at what we're allowing to go into the water. And so trees, they're nice. I mean, they cool the neighborhoods. They take away heat, but they're also an investment in the health of the Indian River Lagoon. And you got to look at it that way too. There's going to be stronger stormwater rules coming down the pike and low impact development. And so there, in this tree ordinance, I think staff has done a really good job. There's a lot of ways that the tree preservation areas can be done, like in low impact development, stormwater retention and detention areas, buffers, wetlands, and wetland buffers. So, and there's also incentives. So there are ways to do this. It's not a punishment. It's an investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card, please.
Bruce Moy.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I apologize for my address. This is my field inspection outfit, not my public hearing outfit.
Name and address, please.
Bruce Moia, representing the HBCA on O'Galley Boulevard. Hopefully I'll be very specific on what I like and don't like about this ordinance. We've talked about this before, and I'm not going to change my mind. We did say that we were in favor of the staff's version, but we did have some items that we did like to be looked at, and specifically that some of them were actually talked about earlier tonight. One was that all trees are not created equal. We agree. We would like you to add hardwoods to that language, because I don't think we need to be mitigating for palm trees. I think we've got plenty of those, and probably not even pines. Some of the things that were also talked about were the forested wetland credits. Should we be giving them or should we not? And I think the answer is emphatically yes. And the memo that I provided previously with those bullet point items dated July 20th, we would feel that if you have met a certain criteria that you've done enough, you've done a lot. And I'd like to show you, but if you're going to put into preservation for a forested wetland on your property that takes up over 50% of your property, I think you've done a pretty good job preserving, doing tree preservation. So we would hope that would be enough. Also, another item that came up was the commercial and the industrial. Obviously, we're on board with that. I think that's a great way for this board to head on that item. And then another item was about the sketch plat grandfathering. I think that one subdivision, if you could correct me, is probably Huntington. Peggy, would that be the one? No? Okay, well then good. Well then we won't be affected by that one. But I still think that's a good idea. If it's not the one, if it's the one, I don't know what that is. But has it been approved? Okay, so we're good. So we don't have to go. Okay, that's awesome. And then there was some other incentives on there that we thought would be advantageous. And that would be once you've met a certain requirement, that we just don't need to keep going, because if you've preserved so much, don't penalize them again by making them mitigate for the fact that they've preserved so much of the existing canopy and trees. Especially for those properties that are impacted by so many other items that she talked about, that they have very little land to develop, so don't overregulate them. So I think we're specific in that, and besides, with those issues in mind, we're still in favor of the staff's version, especially compared to the other versions that you guys have in your packet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mary Spar. I guess the clock has started. I live in Cocoa. And actually, I'm representing the Sierra Club tonight. So Sierra Club has talked about this ordinance quite a bit, and we want an ordinance that will work. And in order to work, it has to be balanced. You have to balance the economic growth with the environmental concerns. And when you're looking for balance, it is a very difficult thing to achieve. So you have to have something that gives a priority thing to the environmental community, as well as meets some priority wishes of the development community. And that particular balance has been found, we believe, for the environmental community, giving a strong canopy requirement, and I do mean strong in the way of quality, that the canopy is measured and compliance is demonstrated by canopy areas, something that's going to be much more practical for the developers, actually. And for the development community, the mitigation needs to be reduced. And then to tie the two together, you have incentives. And this is kind of the framework that staff's ordinance has. The compromise ordinance has that. And I say it's very difficult to achieve because you change one thing and that affects others. We would like to see, just if I can go through very, very quickly, we'd like you to authorize staff to look at a few things. Their language on the canopy areas has some inconsistencies and possible legal loopholes. We'd like you to authorize them to take a look at that and give more specifics in how planted tree, canopy from planted tree will be measured. Right now, it's quite unfair to developers because it's the canopy that exists on a small tree, which is not much. I'll finish up very soon. Okay. We want to avoid the legal problem with Florida statutes and have staff look at explicitly saying that required canopy areas shall not include portions of individual residential lots. And
That's good.
that's it.
That was a good stopping point, obviously.
Yes, I'll stop there.
I appreciate your words, and it's well thought out. Thank you. Hello, sir. Name and address. There you go.
Robin Fisher, 1019 Indian River Avenue. Was not planning on speaking tonight, but I've heard some of the speakers speak to you 5 or 6 different times on this issue, and I've kind of sat in the background, kind of quiet, just listening. But Ms. Rezanka said something tonight that was interesting to me, that last 4 developments came in. She said that they preserve more trees than actually this new ordinance would require. Or something along those lines. Right. Yeah.
Let's just say it was brilliant.
Okay. Yeah. So you got to like brilliancy. So with that in mind, I'm trying to think, do we even have a tree problem? So I'm been in Titusville since 1989. Live on the river. I was one of the county commissioners that pushed hard that we put the half-cent sales tax in to clean the lagoon up. Got a business, so I care about everything that everybody out here says they care about, but I tell you, I don't like this ordinance. As a county commissioner, I always told my county staff members, don't bring me anything that makes development harder to do, because it's hard enough. And if you ever try to develop anything in this town or this county, the rules and ordinance that you have to go through today makes it very, very difficult to develop. In Titusville, believe it or not, and the reason we were able to create the economic development zone was because we went through the city and we looked at all the land that was federally owned, it was state owned, it was city owned, it was county owned, and it was a lot. It was more than 50% of our land mass. We don't have a tree problem in North Brevard. If you want to see a tree problem, go to Vieira. There is a lot of land in this community that has trees on it. And I can tell you, as a county, we went and bought a bunch of property for eels, and that was an environmental sensitive program that acquired a bunch of sites. So between all the different agencies in state and county and school board and all that, we've got trees. If you don't want to, go stand in the middle of the bridge and look west. You'll see it. I'm just telling you that development, as hard as it is, and it's very difficult, and I know you as elected officials, you only get to hear from people, well, I'm a business owner, I live on the river, I care about my grandkids, but I'm telling you, don't make development any harder. I own a piece of property in town that I think that this ordinance would affect drastically. And between the wetlands that we have in this community already in North Brevard, it also, it ties up, makes it hard to do. And wasn't planning on speaking, but Mayor, I know you said you don't get to hear the other side of it. Well, you got a business owner, investor who spent 8 years trying to make sure that Titusville wasn't the armpit of the county and try to get it developed and move development up here. And we finally got it going, and this ordinance will slow it down. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And that was the last card? All right. First of all, I appreciate everyone for speaking. I appreciate your passion. I would say, I've said it before, and I'll say it again, and I won't say it at the risk of anything. I'm just going to say it. Just because someone works at a veterinarian's office doesn't mean they love their dog any more than I love my dog. So what I'm trying to say is, and most of you aren't there, but there's a few people out there that feel like if I'm not standing there with you or sitting out there with you or speaking over there, I don't love trees like you love trees. I reject that. Enough said. Anybody else got anything to say? All right, we don't need to vote on this. We don't pass this. We do that later. Tell me the date on that.
Your next meeting is the 24th of August at 6:30. Yes, sir.
And we'll all be here again. We'll all be here again.